"I speak out for people around me who are afraid," said I. "Why? Because we're all tiny sunflower seeds, but we're all part of something bigger, too."
Alan L. Hart, 1890 to 1962. When he was young, Alan was known as Lucille. His parents named him that because they thought he was a girl, but Alan didn't feel comfortable in his own body. He didn't feel comfortable because he felt as if he was trapped in the body of a girl. "Can I cut my hair and be a boy?" he'd ask his mum. She wouldn't listen. When he had to go to school, Alan was forced to wear girls' clothes. He struggled throughout his years there, and to cope with his problem, he lost himself in his studies, especially science. That hard work earned him a place at university, where he met and fell in love with a woman. But when Alan wore the boys' clothes he preferred, she left him. Struggling, Alan went to visit a psychiatrist called Dr. Gilbert. After a lot of tests and questions, Dr. Gilbert diagnosed Alan as being transgender. It meant that the body he was in didn't match how he felt inside. For Dr. Gilbert, Alan had been born a boy in a girl's body. Dr. Gilbert firmly believed that the opposite could be true too, where girls were born in the bodies of boys. Alan just wanted to be accepted for the man he was, and to be allowed to study and practice medicine, so Dr. Gilbert performed an operation on him. Alan became one of the first ever transgender people to have their body changed to match how they felt inside. As well as studying medicine, Alan channeled all of his experiences into novels that became bestsellers. He fell in love with a woman, married her, and they lived together happily for 37 years. During that time, he conducted groundbreaking work on a disease called tuberculosis and saved a lot of lives. Society made life difficult for people like Alan, but that never stopped Alan doing everything he could for society.
Alan Turing, 1912 to 1954. During the Second World War, countries would speak to each other using codes to prevent their enemies from understanding their messages. The most important and difficult code was used by the Germans. It was called Enigma. Britain desperately needed to crack it. If they could, they'd know all of their enemies' secrets, including their next moves, but it was almost impossible. There was only one person they could think of who might be able to help: Alan Turing. Alan had loved numbers ever since he was a child. He wasn't encouraged at school, but when he got to university, Alan flourished. He was studying pure mathematics. Then his unusual way of thinking led him to look for practical ways of using maths. He wanted to change the way people lived in a useful manner. He published a paper that turned out to signal the beginning of modern computers. Once they'd brought him in, Alan helped the government break the Enigma code by building a machine called the bomb. Some people think that, by cracking the code, Alan shortened the war by 4 years, which would mean he saved millions of lives. In 1952, police heard rumours that he was gay. At the time, being gay was still a crime, and he was arrested. Alan was found guilty. Even after what he'd done for the country, he was given the choice of jail or taking drugs that would supposedly change him. He chose the drugs, and they made him sick. It hurt so much that he poisoned himself and died. But he was never forgotten. 61 years later, in 2013, Alan was granted a posthumous royal pardon, and 4 years after that, in 2017, Turing's Law was passed, pardoning all men who had ever been convicted of anything related to being gay. His great-niece, Rachel Barnes, thinks it's tremendous, but wants people to remember that Alan was a lot more than just his sexuality. He was an incredibly intelligent, devoted and forward-thinking person who helped save the lives of countless others.
Arthur Rimbaud, 1854 to 1891. In 1871, the streets of Paris were buzzing with talk of a dazzling young poet called Arthur Rimbaud. He was only 17 years old and had appeared from nowhere, writing beautiful, funny, and sometimes disgusting poems about anger, sadness, and the hardships of growing up. A few years later, most people thought Arthur was dead. He wasn't. He just stopped writing poetry. After being homeless, shot by his boyfriend, and so poor he couldn't pay for the books he'd had printed, Arthur wanted to raise money and help his family out of poverty.